Selected parts from the book One Life is Not Enough, written by Shri K. Natwar Singh. Part 13. For the 1963 session of the UN General Assembly, the Prime Minister selected Mrs. Pandit to lead the delegation. Because of the London episode, I was not particularly pleased by her arrival. I also remembered how in April 1960, when Krishna Masi was staying with her sister in London, she wrote me a letter criticizing Mrs. Vijayalakshmi Pandit's lifestyle. It is an astounding setup. No office, shopping, parties, hairdressers, more parties, cancellation of programs due to ill health, but no social cancellations. In another letter, she said that Mrs. Pandit has played another foul trick on me and stabbed me in the back. I am coming to Delhi on the 31st evening by plane 10:30 or something with Raja, that is her husband, and I am going to have it out once and for all with the Prime Minister. On a visit to West Germany in 1959, she was presented with a two-seater Mercedes which she accepted. Mrs. Pandit got to know of this and wrote to her brother that it would create a wrong impression if Krishna Masi was to accept the car. Krishna Masi never forgave her elder sister for what she called her betrayal. The Prime Minister did not want to get involved in the tiff between the two sisters. Eventually, Lal Bahadur Shastri, whom Pandit Nehru had deputed to sort the mess out, found a solution whereby Krishna Masi could keep the car but would have to pay import duty for it. I became a close friend of Rita Dar, Vijayalakshmi Pandit's youngest daughter. Rita's husband, Avatar Dar, was the number 2 man in our embassy in Washington. Rita was good looking, amusing, and vivacious, with a gift for diplomatic hijinks. One day, out of the blue, she telephoned to congratulate me on a book review I had done for the New York Times. She also said that she would be coming to New York to be with her mother during the session of the General Assembly. They would be staying at Carlyle Hotel, the elegant sanctuary of the diplomatic elite. Within a day or two, I was asked to become an ADC cum secretary to her mother. I was astounded. I had not even gone to receive her at the airport. I asked Rita how I had been selected to serve her mother. I also told her that I was not really looking forward to the assignment. She said she had not the foggiest idea and asked me not to worry. Mummy is the nicest person in the world. You will adore her. I cannot say that I was not a little tense when I arrived at the hotel to see the leader of the Indian delegation, who greeted me with a haughty authority combined with grace. I addressed her as Madam. Stop calling me Madam. What do you call Krishna? Masi, I said. You can call me that too, she replied. For the next few weeks, I spent several hours each day with her. She had last been at the UN nearly 9 years earlier in 1953 when she had been elected President of the UN General Assembly. In that interval, the UN had changed. The white faces no longer dominated as Afro Asian members were now in a majority. Everyone at the UN was deferential to her, keen to exchange a few words with this beautiful, sophisticated woman. I soon began to enjoy myself. I met the famous and influential in her company. She looked 10 years younger than she was, elegant, stylish, vibrant, and with an amazing voice. The Nehru aura was very much in evidence. This was one of the reasons for the rivalry between the two sisters, Krishna and Vijayalakshmi. The elder sister was good looking while the younger was not. Krishna Masi also lacked the touch of magic that made her elder sister so formidable a social and diplomatic star. The fame that Mrs. Pandit enjoyed irked Mrs. Huti Singh no end. She tried to drown her frustration in alcohol, which did her no good. She had always treated me like a son. When she died of a heart attack in London in 1967, my grief lasted many months. Her autobiography, With No Regrets, is a charming book. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, the foreign minister of Pakistan at the time, was leading his country's delegation at the 1963 session. Mrs. Pandit had known his father, Shah Nawaz Bhutto, but the young Bhutto was cast in a different mold. He was a product of Berkeley and Oxford, a fine debater, abrasive, arrogant, and sartorially striking. He was an outstanding foreign minister who outwitted us in weaning China away from the US without annoying the US. In his speech, he made a blistering and venomous attack on India. On the issue of Kashmir, he was offensive beyond words. Vijayalakshmi Pandit's immediate reaction was to exercise her right of reply. It required a combination of tact and persuasion to dissuade her from doing so. I told her that nothing would please Bhutto more than to get a reaction from her. So, instead, she asked one of the senior secretaries to reply to the considerable discomfiture of the Pakistanis. On 22nd November 1963, I was driving to the UN and listening to the news. Suddenly, the regular program was interrupted and it was announced that President Kennedy had been shot in Dallas, Texas. I stepped on the accelerator. On reaching the UN, I ran up to the delegates' dining room where Mrs. Pandit was lunching with friends. She had already heard the news but asked me to keep her informed on any development. Very soon, the news of Kennedy's death was confirmed. It was a tragedy that generated grief throughout the world. For our embassy in Washington, the pressing question was who would represent India at the funeral. The first message from Delhi to B.K. Nehru said that he should lay a wreath on Kennedy's coffin. B.K. Nehru's suggestion that the Prime Minister personally attend the funeral was ignored. It was finally decided that Mrs. Pandit would represent India. I accompanied her to the Washington on 24 November. The state funeral of the late president was impressive, somber, and meticulously planned. Most eyes were wet when Mrs. Kennedy received the US flag, which had been wrapped round the coffin, from her brother in law Robert Kennedy at the graveside in Arlington Cemetery. More than 50 heads of state and government attended the burial. I kept asking why Jawaharlal Nehru did not attend. After all, Kennedy, in the midst of Cuban Missile Crisis, had gone out of his way to aid us in the disastrous Sino-Indian War. In the late afternoon, a reception was held in the White House by Jacqueline Kennedy. I attended with Mrs. Pandit and B.K. Nehru. Several leaders, including Charles de Gaulle of France, came over to Mrs. Pandit to have a few words with her. What is imprinted in mind is the composure, self-control, and the poise of Mrs. Kennedy. The morbid thought occurred to me that if a bomb was to go off in the room, several countries would be left without a government. We returned to New York on 26 November. Eulogies were paid to Kennedy at the UN. Mrs. Pandit asked me to draft her memorial tribute. That speech was one of my best efforts, to which she made only one or two minor corrections. A pleasant memory of that year is the unannounced arrival of M.F. Hussain, who stayed with me. Hussain was not yet a celebrity, but would soon be. He was free as a bird, temperamental, unpredictable, unpunctual, and unconcerned except for his art. He was also generous to a fault. He survived mostly on fresh air, biscuits, tea. He did then wear shoes and did not carry a 3-foot long paintbrush. I asked him if he had brought any paintings with him. He had not. Then he startled me by announcing that he would paint them in my apartment, which he did, 30 in all. We exhibited them in a large hall in the Permanent Mission, as he could not find a gallery to showcase his work. He painted portraits of Pearl S. Buck, R.K. Narayan, who happened to be in New York at the time, Ved Mehta, the blind Indian author, and two of mine. Few knew that this free bird had a very thin skin. One day, he came to meet me in my office. The security guard asked who he was and whom he wished to see. When I got home in the evening, I did not find Hussein there. Instead, there was a short note saying he had decided to leave New York because he could not tolerate being cross examined by guards. That was that. I was a little irritated that he hadn't waited for me. Even unconventionality must be tempered by restraint. My elder brother Bhagat Singh arrived in New York sometime later. He had come for a 3-month holiday, but in fact, he made New York his home for the next 47 years. He had done his tripos in economics from Cambridge in 1949. Immediately after, Burma Shell employed him while he was still in England. He was posted to Calcutta but did not last long there. To his horror, he observed that the whites had their meals on a platform in the dining room while the Indians sat at a lower level. What was even more galling was that the whites were served before Indians. This 3 years after independence. At least one of the Englishmen had been with him at Cambridge. We Bharatpur people do not put up with racist behavior. My brother, to his credit, resigned and returned to Bharatpur. No other Indian did. They willingly did jihujuri to third-rate Englishmen. Exclusive clubs still existed then. Indians were not allowed entry to, let alone become members of, the Calcutta Club. It was only in the mid 50s that the whites realized that times had changed. In one of my meetings with Santa and Raja Rao, Raja remarked that Forster would be 85 years old on 1st January 1964. Santa immediately suggested that we do a book of tributes on him, which should be published on that date, and that I should edit the volume. I said that it would be presumptuous of me to undertake such a task. Santa firmly announced, no arguments, Natwar, you are going to do it and for my sake. Now let us get down to names. Over the next day or two, we agreed on Mulk Raj Anand, Narayana Menon, Ahmed Ali, Raja Rao, R.K. Narayan, Santa and me. R.K. Narayan, to my annoyance, declined. Santa was to find a publisher and I was to write to Forster. On 1st May came Forster's reply. What an agreeable idea, and may I be here in New York in 1964 and more fully to appreciate it. It would be excellent to include my tribute to Gandhiji, for I don't think it was widely known. My kindest regards to Santa Rama Rao when you see her. Santa got in touch with Forster's American publishers, Harcourt Brace and World. They were interested only in the sales. Except for Santa, none of the other authors were known in America. So I asked Forster if he would permit us to include some of his writings on India in it. He promptly agreed, saying that He did not wish to sign any contract, neither did he want any payment. E.M. Forster, a tribute, hit the bookshops on Forster's birthday. Its publication created a minor literary ripple. The bay windows of bookshops on Fifth Avenue and Second Avenue displayed the book for over a month. It went into a second print within 2 weeks of publication and was widely reviewed. Thank you very much. Rita was good looking, amusing, and vivacious with a gift for diplomatic jinx. Vivacious. Vivacious. Vivacious means lively, high spirited. Hijinks. Hijinks. Hijinks means boisterous fun, practical joke. I told her that nothing would please Bhutto more than to get a reaction from her. So, instead, she asked one of the senior secretaries to reply to the considerable discomfiture of the Pakistanis. Discomfiture. Discomfiture means embarrassment, unease. The morbid thought occurred to me that if a bomb was to go off in the room, several countries would be left without a government. Morbid. Morbid. Morbid means grisly, gruesome. We returned to New York on 26th November. Eulogies were paid to Kennedy at the United Nations. EULOGIS. Eulogies means tributes. He was also generous to a fault. Generous to a fault means extremely kind or generous. I was a little irritated that he had not waited for me. Even unconventionality must be tempered by restraint. Unconventionality. Unconventionality means different from what is usual. What was even more galling was that the whites were served before Indians. Galling. Galling means irritating, exasperating. I said that it would be presumptuous of me to undertake such a task. Presumptuous. Presumptuous means excessively bold, brazen. Thank you very much.